My son sold his house and gave his wife $700,000 to spend on whatever she wanted. Then they came to live in my house, as if it were a matter of course. I said, no. And my daughter-in-law slapped me in front of the neighbors. That same day, I called my lawyer. When they received the court summons, my daughter-in-law panicked because she realized that justice was coming for them. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The phone rang just as I lifted the fork to my mouth. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Mary's recipe, though mine never tasted quite right. I set the fork down and reached for the old landline. Dad, I have amazing news. We sold the house for $700,000. Jeremy's voice crackled with artificial enthusiasm. I nearly choked on the bite I'd just taken. Jeremy, that's... Wait, what? You sold the house? Can you believe it? 700,000? The market's incredible right now. We got way more than expected. The fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the plate. Something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with dinner. Son, I don't understand. When did you sell it? You never mentioned... It happened fast, Dad. Really fast. These buyers came in with cash. No inspection needed. We couldn't pass it up. I stood, carrying the phone toward the living room. My legs felt unsteady. Jeremy, where will you live now? A pause. In the background, I heard traffic noise. Maybe a car door slamming. We'll figure it out, Dad. Don't worry about us. The important thing is we made this incredible profit. But Jeremy, that was your home. You and Lori just bought it 3 years ago. Right, and now we've made a fortune. Lori's so excited. She's already talking about all the things we can finally afford. The coldness in my stomach spread upward. I sank into my armchair, the one facing Mary's photograph on the mantel. Things? What kind of things? Oh, you know Lori. She's got her eye on some designer furniture, maybe that Mercedes she's been wanting. And there's this amazing spa vacation package she found. Jeremy. My voice came out sharper than intended. What about the $300,000 I gave you for that house? Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Dad? I'm here, son. Look, Dad, you gave us that money. Now it's our money. We can do what we want with it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Mary's smiling face in the silver frame, remembering how she'd always said Jeremy had a good heart, just needed guidance. Our money? Jeremy, that was a loan. We discussed. Did we? I don't remember signing any loan papers. My hand trembled as I held the receiver. You didn't need to sign papers. You're my son. You promised you'd pay me back when you could. Jeremy's laugh sounded nothing like the boy I'd raised. Dad, that was just talk. You know how these family things go. Besides, you don't need the money. You've got that big house, your pension, Mom's life insurance. Jeremy, I trusted you. And you should be happy for us. Your son is finally getting ahead in life. Isn't that what parents want? I stood again, walking to my study. The receiver cord stretched as far as it would go. My desk drawer stuck. It always did. But I yanked it open and pulled out the manila folder I kept there. Jeremy, I have the bank records right here. $300,000, withdrawn from my retirement account in June 2021. You said it was for your dream house that you'd pay me back. Dad, let it go. We're family. Family helps each other. Help each other? What about helping me? What about honoring your word? Look, I've got to run. Lori's waiting in the car and we have things to do. Thanks for being understanding about this. Jeremy, wait. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I stood there holding the dead phone, staring at the bank documents scattered across my desk. 3 years ago, those same papers had represented hope, love, trust. Now they felt like evidence of the biggest mistake I'd ever made. I set the receiver back in its cradle and picked up the loan documentation. My signature looked so confident, so trusting. Jeremy's handwriting was there too, not on any official papers, but on the thank you card he'd given me afterward. Dad, you're the best. We'll definitely pay you back. Love, Jeremy and Lori. The words blurred as I held the card under my desk lamp. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows of my empty house. The thank you card trembled in my hands. Jeremy's handwriting hadn't changed much since childhood. Still that same hurried scrawl I'd seen on homework assignments and birthday cards. But now those loops and slashes felt like lies, written in ink. I set the card down and opened the bank statement from June 2021. There it was, withdrawal of $300,000 from my retirement savings, the largest single transaction I'd ever made, and I'd done it without hesitation. The memory hit me with startling clarity. That Sunday afternoon in late spring, windows open, birds singing in the backyard, Jeremy and Lori sitting at my kitchen table, her hand resting on his arm as he explained their situation. "Dad, we found our dream house, but we're $300,000 short for the down payment." I'd been making coffee, the same Maxwell house I still drank every morning. The smell of it filled the kitchen as I listened to my son's hopeful voice. "The sellers want to close quickly," Lori had added, her smile bright and grateful. "We've never asked you for anything like this, but we didn't know where else to turn." I remembered setting down the coffee pot, looking at their young faces full of dreams and possibility. Jeremy had seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wedding ring. Lori kept smoothing her hair, the way she did when she was trying to make a good impression. "Of course, son, I'll help. This is for your family." The relief on Jeremy's face had been immediate and genuine, or so I'd thought. He'd stood up and hugged me, something he rarely did anymore. "Dad, you're the best. We'll definitely pay you back. I know this is a lot of money." "Don't rush, Jeremy. The important thing is that you're happy. You and Lori deserve a beautiful home." Even Lori had tears in her eyes that day, thanking me over and over. She'd called me the most generous father-in-law in the world. I poured myself a scotch, something I rarely did on weeknights. The amber liquid burned, but it felt appropriate somehow. Everything burned now. That afternoon in 2021, I'd felt like the luckiest man alive. My son needed help, and I could provide it. Mary would have been proud, I'd thought. She'd always believed in taking care of family first. But that Jeremy, grateful, respectful, making promises, where had he gone? When did he become this stranger who laughed at my trust and called my generosity foolish? I walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street. The Johnsons' porch light was on, and I could see Harold Jenkins checking his mailbox even though it was past 9 o'clock. Normal people living normal lives, probably never imagining their own children could betray them so completely. The bank documents felt heavier when I picked them up again. Not just paper anymore, but evidence of my own foolishness. I'd signed my name so confidently, believing in promises that meant nothing. Back at my desk, I spread out the papers chronologically. The withdrawal slip from June 15th, 2021. The thank you card dated June 20th. The photos Jeremy had texted me of their new house in July. All evidence of a time when I believed my son was a man of his word. Mary's photograph watched me from across the room. I'd caught her expression in that picture during our last Christmas together. Patient, knowing, slightly amused by something I'd said. What would she think of this situation? What would she tell me to do? I knew the answer. Mary never let anyone walk on her, not even family. Especially not family. The scotch was nearly gone when I finally closed the folder and secured it back in the desk drawer. The documents would still be there tomorrow, still proof of Jeremy's promises and my misplaced trust. But tonight, for the first time since that phone call, I felt something besides shock and hurt. Something harder, colder, something that felt almost like Mary's strength flowing through me. I turned off the desk lamp and headed upstairs, the old wooden steps creaking under my feet. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight I needed sleep. Real sleep, not the restless tossing I'd been doing since Mary passed. The house settled around me as I climbed toward the bedroom, every familiar sound a reminder that this was my home, my sanctuary, my castle, and nobody, not even my own son, was going to take that away from me. The pounding on my front door shattered the morning quiet like gunfire. I jolted awake, squinting at the bedside clock, 7:15 a.m. The knocking came again, aggressive and demanding. I stumbled to the window, pulling back the curtain. A moving truck sat in my driveway. Jeremy's car was parked behind it, trunk open, suitcases visible. The knocking resumed, more violent this time. I threw on my robe and slippers, hurrying downstairs. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I could see two figures, one tall, one shorter. My hands shook as I turned the deadbolt. Jeremy stood on my porch, grinning like this was Christmas morning. Behind him, Lori held a designer suitcase, her makeup perfect despite the early hour. "Hi, Dad. We're here." I blinked at them, still processing. "What does this mean, Jeremy?" "Well, since we sold the house, we need somewhere to stay." He gestured toward the moving truck like it explained everything. "We'll stay with you temporarily, just until we find something suitable." The cold October air bit through my thin robe. "No, absolutely not. You don't belong here." Jeremy's smile faltered for just a moment. "Dad, don't be selfish. You have this big house, and we're your family." He moved forward like he intended to walk right past me, but I stepped into the doorway, gripping the frame. "This is my home. You made your choices." "Our choices?" Lori's voice was sharp as broken glass. "We're family. Family helps each other in times of need." I stared at her perfectly styled hair, her expensive jacket, the diamond earrings catching the morning light. "Times of need? You just sold a house for $700,000. "That money's already allocated," Jeremy said, his tone turning cold. "Lori has needs, Dad. Important needs." "More important than having a place to live?" From across the street, I noticed Harold Jenkins in his front yard, pretending to check his morning paper, but clearly listening. Mrs. Chen's curtains twitched at her window. "Dad, you're being unreasonable." Jeremy's voice carried across the quiet neighborhood. "We're not asking for charity. We're asking for temporary family support." "After you stole $300,000 from me?" "We didn't steal anything." Lori stepped forward, her face flushing red. "You gave us that money freely. It was a loan." "Where's the paperwork?" Jeremy challenged. "Show me the signed loan documents." The morning was getting colder, and I pulled my robe tighter. More neighbors were visible now. The Johnsons had stopped their morning walk, standing near their mailbox and watching. "You know there are no papers," I said quietly. I trusted my own son. "Well, maybe you shouldn't be so trusting," Lori snapped. "Maybe you should have thought harder before making promises you'd regret." "Lori, that's enough," Jeremy said, but he didn't sound sorry. He sounded tired. "No, it's not enough." She turned back to me, her voice rising. "You're a selfish old man sitting in this huge house all alone. We're young, we have our whole lives ahead of us, and you want us to suffer because of your buyer's remorse." Harold had moved closer now, no longer pretending to read his paper. Other neighbors were emerging, people walking dogs, checking mailboxes, all of them drawn to the commotion. "I want you to leave my property," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Dad, you'll regret this decision," Jeremy said. The mask was completely off now. No more fake smiles, no more cheerful manipulation. "Family is supposed to stick together. When you're old and sick and need help, remember this moment." "Is that a threat, son?" "It's reality, Dad. You're not getting any younger." Lori stepped even closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "You'll change your mind. You'll come begging us to come back, and maybe we'll consider it." "Get off my property." That's when she slapped me. The sound cracked across the morning air like a whip. My head snapped back, my cheeks stinging, and I stumbled against the doorframe. The humiliation burned worse than the physical pain. Harold dropped his newspaper and stepped forward. "Hey, that's enough!" Jeremy grabbed Lori's arm, pulling her back toward the car. "Come on, we're done here." "You'll regret your greed," Lori shouted over her shoulder as Jeremy dragged her away. "You'll regret being such a selfish, bitter old man." They threw their suitcases into the trunk, Jeremy slamming it so hard the whole car shook. The moving truck driver, who'd been sitting in his cab during the entire confrontation, started his engine. As they drove away, tires squealing against the asphalt, Harold approached with concern written across his weathered face. I touched my stinging cheek, aware that half the neighborhood had just witnessed my son's wife assault me on my own front porch. The morning air felt even colder now, but I remained standing in my doorway, watching their car disappear around the corner. Harold approached slowly, his weathered face creased with concern. Behind him, other neighbors lingered. Mrs. Chen had stepped onto her porch, and the Johnsons stood frozen near their mailbox. "Willard, friend, you did the right thing," Harold said, his voice steady but kind. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself." I touched my cheek where Lori's hand had landed. The sting was already fading, but the humiliation burned deeper. 35 years of raising Jeremy, of giving him everything I could, And this was how it ended. His wife striking me in front of my neighbors. "Did you see what happened?" I asked Harold, though I knew he had. "Every bit of it. So did Tom Patterson over there, and the Johnsons. If you need witnesses to what that woman did, you've got them." Tom Patterson raised his hand in a small wave from his driveway, his expression grim but supportive. Mrs. Chen nodded from her porch, her usual morning smile replaced by something fiercer. "That boy of yours was out of line," Harold continued, glancing toward the street where Jeremy's car had disappeared. "And his wife? Well, that was assault. Plain and simple. Assault. The word hung in the cool morning air like a verdict. I'd been thinking of it as a slap, a moment of lost temper. But Harold was right. In the eyes of the law, Laurie had committed assault. "I raised him better than this," I said, more to myself than to Harold. "Sometimes kids go wrong despite good raising. Happens to the best of families. The question now is what you plan to do about it." What did I plan to do? 24 hours ago I'd been a peaceful widower, enjoying his quiet retirement. Now I was a man who'd been threatened and struck by his own family. "Harold, I need to think. Get my bearings." "Of course you do. But Willard, if you decide to press charges or take legal action, you'll have support. This neighborhood has your back." The Johnsons walked closer, their morning exercise clothes damp with October dew. "Willard, we're so sorry," Mrs. Johnson said. "We heard the whole thing. That young woman had no right." "No right at all," her husband agreed. "You were defending your own home." I looked at my house, the house Mary and I had bought 40 years ago, where we'd raised Jeremy, where we'd planned to grow old together, where I'd planned to live out my remaining years in peace. "I should go inside," I said finally. Harold nodded, but didn't move away immediately. "Willard, I'm right across the street if you need anything, and I mean anything. Coffee, conversation, or help dealing with whatever comes next." The other neighbors murmured similar offers before beginning to disperse. Tom Patterson lingered, walking over to where Harold and I stood. "Willard, I've seen family fights before, but nothing like that. Your son's wife crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed." "Thank you, Tom. Harold's right about the witnesses. What happened here this morning, it wasn't just a family dispute. That woman attacked you on your own property." After they'd all gone, I stood alone in my front yard, touching my face again. The physical pain was minimal, but something else had changed. The man who'd answered Jeremy's phone call Friday night was gone, replaced by someone harder, more determined. I walked back to my front door, pausing to look at the tire marks Jeremy's car had left on my driveway. Evidence of their hasty retreat, their guilty knowledge of what they'd done. Inside, the house felt different, not violated, but somehow more fortress-like. My sanctuary had been threatened, but it had held, and I was still here, still standing, still the owner of this place they'd tried to claim. The red mark on my cheek would fade, but the clarity it had brought me would not. The bathroom mirror showed me a stranger, not the defeated old man Jeremy probably expected, but someone with steel in his eyes and a red handprint on his left cheek, like a badge of war. I touched the tender skin gently. Laurie's ring had left a small scratch near my ear. Evidence, I realized, proof of what she'd done. But I needed more than evidence of assault. I needed strategy. Walking to my study, I felt different, steadier, more focused than I'd been since Mary's death 2 years ago. The morning's humiliation had burned away something soft in me, revealing the engineer I'd always been underneath, methodical, practical, uncompromising when it came to solving problems. Jeremy was a problem that needed solving. I settled into my favorite armchair and opened the desk drawer where I kept important documents. My filing system was alphabetical and precise, habits from 40 years of engineering work. Under J for Jeremy, I found the folder I was looking for. The loan agreement was exactly where I'd left it, in a manila envelope marked Jeremy House Loan 2021. I pulled it out carefully, handling the papers like the legal weapons they were. Mary's photograph watched me from the desk, her smile encouraging. She'd always said I was too trusting when it came to family, too willing to give without protecting myself. "Fight for justice, Willard," she'd told me once during a dispute with a contractor. "Being nice doesn't mean being weak." Time to stop being nice. The contract was 8 pages long, typed on Samuel Grant's official letterhead. I put on my reading glasses and examined every clause, every paragraph, every word that Jeremy had agreed to when he signed his name 3 years ago. Principal amount, $300,000. Term, 5 years, with payments beginning January 2022. Default clause, if payments were missed for more than 90 days, the entire balance became immediately due. Jeremy hadn't made a single payment, not $1 in nearly 3 years. According to the contract, he owed me $300,000 plus accumulated interest at 8% annually. I reached for my calculator, the same one I'd used for engineering calculations for decades. Principal, $300,000 interest for 3 years. $72,000 total amount due. $372,000. My hands were steady as I wrote the figures on a legal pad. Jeremy thought he was clever, claiming the money was a gift. But contracts don't lie, and signatures don't disappear because someone finds them inconvenient. I leaned back in my chair, holding the document up to the morning light streaming through my study window. Jeremy's signature was clear, witnessed by Samuel and notarized by Samuel's secretary. Legal, binding, and enforceable. For the first time since Friday night's phone call, I smiled. The boy who'd thrown tantrums when he didn't get his way, who'd learned to manipulate rather than earn, who'd brought that woman to strike me in my own yard, that boy had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his father. I organized the papers carefully, making copies with my home scanner, another habit from my engineering days. Always have backups. Always document everything. Always be prepared. The original documents went back into their folder, which went back into the drawer, which I locked with the small key I kept on my keyring. The copies went into a second folder marked Legal Action Jeremy. Outside, I could hear normal Saturday morning sounds. Lawn mowers, children playing, dogs barking. Life continuing as if nothing had changed. But something fundamental had shifted in my world, and I was finally ready to acknowledge it. Jeremy wasn't my little boy anymore. He was a man who'd stolen from his father and allowed his wife to assault me. He was someone who needed to learn that actions have consequences. I looked at Mary's photograph again, imagining her approval of my methodical approach. She'd married an engineer, after all. She knew I was capable of more than just kindness. The phone sat on my desk, Samuel Grant's number programmed into memory, but not yet. First, I needed to plan exactly what I wanted from this confrontation. Revenge was a dish best served cold, Mary used to say, though she was usually talking about dinner leftovers. The contract felt solid in my hands, a bridge between Jeremy's promises and his accountability, between his assumptions and reality. I settled deeper into my chair and began to read the document again, this time looking for every advantage, every legal tool at my disposal. The morning was young, and I had work to do. Jeremy's signature stared up at me from the bottom of page 8, hasty but legible, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and school reports for 35 years, but something about it triggered a specific memory, sharp and clear as yesterday. Summer 2021, Samuel's office downtown, the leather chairs still holding the afternoon heat, legal diplomas arranged precisely on mahogany-paneled walls. Jeremy had been fidgeting with his wedding ring while I explained why we needed documentation. "Dad, why don't you trust me?" he'd asked, his voice carrying that edge of hurt he'd perfected as a teenager. "This isn't about trust," I'd replied, watching Samuel organize the contract pages on his conference table. "This is about responsibility, about doing things properly." The memory felt as real as the morning light streaming through my study window. Samuel had been wearing his navy suit that day, the one he saved for important client meetings. He'd arranged coffee for all three of us, though Jeremy barely touched his. "Mr. Brooks," Samuel had said, addressing Jeremy with professional courtesy, "this contract protects both you and your father. It establishes clear terms for repayment and prevents any future misunderstandings." Jeremy had shifted in his chair, looking everywhere except at the documents. "Dad, we're family. Why do we need lawyers and contracts for family?" "Because family doesn't mean foolish," I'd answered. "Your mother always said the clearest agreements make the best relationships." That had been the moment, Jeremy's expression changing from hurt to something harder, more calculating. Even then, 3 years ago, I'd seen a glimpse of the man who would eventually laugh at my trust and allow his wife to strike me. "Fine, Dad," he'd said finally, reaching for Samuel's expensive pen, "if it makes you feel better." But it hadn't made him feel better. I could see that now, remembering how his hand had hesitated before each signature, how he'd asked twice about the default clauses, how his voice had tightened when Samuel explained that the full amount would become due immediately if he missed payments. "Mr. Brooks," Samuel had said to Jeremy, "do you understand that this creates a legal obligation? This isn't a gift that can be forgotten or ignored." "I understand," Jeremy had replied, though his tone suggested he understood nothing except that he needed to sign to get the money. The irony was perfect. Jeremy's reluctance to sign had been my first warning that he wasn't taking the agreement seriously, but his signature, reluctant or not, made the contract legally binding. I closed my eyes, remembering the rest of that afternoon. After the signing, we'd walked to the parking garage together. Jeremy had been quiet, processing what had just happened. "Dad, you know I'm good for this money, right?" "Of course, son, that's why I'm giving it to you. The contract makes it feel businesslike. Sometimes business and family have to overlap. That doesn't mean I love you less." He'd hugged me then, quickly and awkwardly, before getting into his car. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." Those had been the last grateful words I'd heard from my son. Now, sitting in my study 3 years later with his signature under my reading glasses, I understood what Samuel had been protecting me from. Not Jeremy's inability to repay the loan, his unwillingness to acknowledge it existed. The contract was Samuel's gift to me, though I hadn't fully appreciated it at the time. Every clause, every term, every legal protection had been crafted by a man who understood both law and human nature. I reached for my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found Samuel's number. Saturday morning, he'd probably be having breakfast with his wife, reading the newspaper, enjoying his weekend peace. But this couldn't wait until Monday. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Willard, everything all right?" "Samuel, I need to see you. Today, if possible. It's about Jeremy and that loan contract you prepared." A pause, then a change in his tone, from personal friend to professional attorney. "What's happened?" "They sold their house for $700,000. Jeremy called to tell me the money was ours now, and that he never intended to repay the loan. Yesterday morning, he and his wife came here demanding to move in. When I refused, she struck me." "She what?" "Struck me, in front of witnesses. Samuel, I need to know my legal options." Another pause, longer this time. When Samuel spoke again, his voice was granite hard. "Willard, I can meet you at my office in 2 hours, and bring that contract with you. All of it. The whole thing? Every page, every signature, every witness mark. It's time your son learned what his signature actually means." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and looked at Mary's photograph. She was smiling in that picture, the way she did when she was proud of a decision I'd made. The contract felt heavier in my hands now, not just paper and ink, but justice waiting to be served. 2 hours had passed since I'd spoken with Samuel. The contract lay spread across my desk like a battle plan, each clause now familiar as my own name. I'd eaten a quiet lunch, organized my thoughts, and prepared for what came next. At exactly 2:30, I dialed Samuel's office number from memory. "Willard, I've been expecting your call." Samuel's voice was crisp, professional. "I've had time to review our conversation and pull your file. Are you ready to proceed?" "More than ready." "Good. Let me be clear about your legal position. When Jeremy sold that house, he triggered the acceleration clause in your loan agreement. The entire principal becomes immediately due, plus accrued interest at 8% annually." I pulled my calculator closer, though I'd already run the numbers twice. "How much exactly?" $300,000 in principal plus $72,000 in accumulated interest. Jeremy owes you $372,000 as of today." The figure hit me like cold water. Jeremy had stolen from me, then sold the security for my loan, then demanded to live in my house. And now he owed me more money than he'd ever seen in his life. "What about the assault?" "Separate civil action. With witness testimony from Harold and your other neighbors, we can seek damages for the physical attack, emotional distress, and public humiliation. An elderly victim being struck by a family member? That's significant. Samuel's voice carried the satisfaction of a craftsman discussing quality work. Willard, your son made every possible legal mistake. He's violated a contract, sold collateral without permission, and allowed his wife to assault the creditor. It's almost impressive in its stupidity. What's our first move? Two-step approach. First, I'll send a formal demand letter via certified mail, giving him 10 days to pay the full amount. When he inevitably refuses or ignores it, we file in circuit court for contract enforcement and civil damages. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't experienced since Mary died, the deep satisfaction of having a plan that would work. How quickly can this happen? Demand letter goes out tomorrow. If Jeremy's as foolish as he sounds, we'll have our court filing ready within 2 weeks. The beauty of contract law is its simplicity. He signed it, he owes it, the end. Samuel, I need to ask about costs. Willard, we've been friends for 25 years. I'm taking this on contingency, plus expenses. When we win, and we will win, I take 30% of recovery. If somehow we lose, you owe me nothing. The relief was immediate and profound. Samuel understood this wasn't just about money. It was about justice, dignity, and teaching a lesson that was decades overdue. There's something else? I said, remembering Jeremy's dismissive laugh during our Friday call. He thinks I'm too old and weak to fight back. He's counting on me being the same pushover I've always been. Then he's about to learn that even patient men have limits. Willard, your documentation is perfect. Your case is ironclad, and your son is about to discover that legal contracts aren't suggestions. After hanging up, I sat quietly in my study, looking at the contract with new appreciation. What had seemed like simple paperwork 3 years ago was now a loaded weapon, cocked and ready to fire. The afternoon light was shifting, casting longer shadows across my desk. Jeremy was probably at work, unaware that his world was about to change. Lori was likely spending their windfall on whatever caught her fancy, equally oblivious to what was coming. They'd treated me like a fool, a resource to be exploited and discarded. But fools don't keep meticulous records, don't consult lawyers, and don't fight back with precision and planning. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a legal pad, writing Jeremy Legal Action at the top in my careful engineer's handwriting. Below it, I listed Samuel's timeline. Demand letter Tuesday, court filing in 2 weeks, discovery process, trial preparation. For the first time since Friday night, I was looking forward to Monday morning. Monday evening arrived with autumn's early darkness. I'd spent the day reviewing Samuel's strategy, organizing documents, and preparing for what would either be Jeremy's capitulation or his declaration of war. At 6:45 p.m., I dialed Jeremy's number. He answered on the third ring, sounding tired and distracted. Yeah, Dad? Jeremy, I'm calling to demand immediate repayment of the $300,000 loan I provided for your house purchase. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Dad, have you completely lost your mind? What loan are you talking about? His voice carried that familiar edge of condescension, the tone he'd used since college whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. The loan documented in our signed contract from June 2021. You violated the terms by selling the house without repayment. The acceleration clause makes the full amount immediately due. What contract? Dad, you gave us that money as a gift. There's no contract. I looked down at the 8-page document spread before me, Jeremy's signature clear on the final page. Jeremy, you signed a legal agreement. Samuel Grant prepared it, his secretary witnessed it, and it was notarized. The contract exists, and it's enforceable. That worthless piece of paper doesn't mean anything. You can't seriously think... I think you owe me $372,000, principal plus interest, as specified in the agreement you signed. Jeremy's laugh was harsh, brittle. 300 what? Dad, you've really gone off the deep end. Just try to collect. Go ahead and try. Very well, Jeremy. We'll see you in court. The words came out calm and final. 3 years of disappointment, 2 days of planning, and decades of avoiding confrontation had led to this moment. Court? You're threatening to sue your own son over money you gave as a gift? What kind of father does that? The kind who keeps his word and expects others to keep theirs. The kind who doesn't tolerate being struck by his daughter-in-law in his own front yard. That was barely a slap. You're making it sound like assault? Because that's exactly what it was. Battery committed in front of witnesses, Jeremy. Harold Jenkins saw everything, so did the Johnsons and Mrs. Chen. Jeremy's breathing was audible through the phone, quick and shallow. The cocky dismissal was cracking, replaced by something sharper, more desperate. Dad, this is insane. You're talking about destroying our family over money. You destroyed our family when you decided my generosity made me a fool. I'm simply seeking legal remedy for breach of contract. I'll fight you. I'll get my own lawyer, and we'll prove that contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. I hope you do get a lawyer, Jeremy. Any competent attorney will explain that signed contracts are legally binding, regardless of family relationships. The line went quiet, except for Jeremy's labored breathing and what sounded like Laurie's voice in the background, sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. This isn't over, Dad. You'll regret this decision. We'll find ways to fight back that you won't see coming. Jeremy, I'm documenting every threat you make. My attorney is very interested in your responses to legal demands. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently and immediately picked it up again, dialing Samuel's home number. Willard, how did it go? Exactly as you predicted. Complete denial, followed by threats when he realized I was serious. He claims the contract is worthless paper and says he'll fight us in court. Perfect. Denial of a valid contract in the face of clear evidence? That's going to cost him additional attorney fees when we win. Did you document the conversation? Every word, including his admission that Laurie's assault was barely a slap and his threats about finding ways to fight back. Samuel's chuckle was warm and professional. Willard, your son just handed us additional evidence for our case. The demand letter goes out first thing tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I reviewed my notes from the call, writing down Jeremy's exact words while they were fresh in memory. His panic had been obvious beneath the bluster, and his threats only strengthened our legal position. The contract lay before me, no longer just paper and ink, but a sword of justice, sharp and ready for battle. Jeremy had called my bluff, and now he was about to learn it wasn't a bluff at all. Thursday evening's quiet was shattered by my phone's aggressive ringing. I glanced at the caller ID, Jeremy, and checked my watch. 8:30 p.m., right on schedule. Samuel's certified demand letter had been delivered that morning. Dad, what is this legal summons? Did you actually sue your own son? Jeremy's voice cracked with panic, the cocky dismissal from Monday completely gone. In the background, I could hear Laurie's voice, shrill and hostile. Jeremy, you received Samuel's demand letter. You have 10 days to respond with full payment. Full payment? Dad, where am I supposed to get $300,000? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Jeremy had blown through $700,000 in house sale proceeds and couldn't scrape together half that amount. His financial desperation was now crystal clear. That's not my concern. You signed a contract, Jeremy. Honor your obligations. Families should stick together. How can you do this to your own blood? I'd been expecting this, the emotional manipulation, the guilt about family loyalty. But something had changed in me since Saturday morning's assault. The man who would have wavered at those words was gone. You chose this path when you decided to steal from me and let your wife strike me. Actions have consequences. Mom would never approve of this. She'd want the family to stay together. Jeremy's invocation of Mary's memory hit like a physical blow, but not in the way he intended. Instead of guilt, I felt a surge of protective anger. Your mother would be appalled by your behavior. She believed in integrity, Jeremy, in keeping promises and treating people with respect. It was just a slap, nothing serious. You're making it sound like attempted murder. There it was, Jeremy's admission, recorded and documented, that the assault had occurred. Samuel would be very interested in this particular confession. Tell me, Jeremy, would you allow someone to slap your mother and call it nothing serious? Silence, then the sound of heated whispering. Laurie's voice became clearer, more aggressive. Give me that phone, I heard her demand. Then shouting toward the receiver, You selfish old man, you're destroying this family over money. Mrs. Brooks, I said formally, your voice is being recorded. Continue making threats if you'd like them documented for court proceedings. The phone was apparently jerked away from Lori, Jeremy's voice returning but shakier now. Dad, please, we can work this out. Family to family. No lawyers, no courts, just us talking like reasonable people. We had that conversation Monday. You called the contract worthless paper and threatened to fight me in court. Now you're getting exactly what you asked for. You'll regret this. We'll find ways to stop you. Ways you won't see coming. Jeremy, I'm documenting every threat you make. Each hostile word becomes additional evidence in our civil case. Civil case? Assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and now intimidation of a witness. Your wife struck me in front of multiple neighbors, and you're threatening retaliation for pursuing legal remedies. The breathing on the other end became rapid, panicked. Jeremy was finally understanding the full scope of his legal exposure. Dad, we don't have that kind of money. Even if we wanted to pay, which we don't, we can't. Then you'll need to figure out how to liquidate assets, Jeremy. Sell Lori's Mercedes, her jewelry, whatever you bought with my money, or the court will do it for you. This is blackmail. This is contract enforcement. There's a significant legal difference. More background shouting from Lori. Then Jeremy's voice, strained and desperate. Fine. If you want to tear this family apart, you've succeeded. When this is over, you'll never see us again. I'm looking forward to that outcome. The line went dead. I immediately dialed Samuel's number, my hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Willard, I take it Jeremy received our letter? Complete panic, followed by manipulation attempts, followed by threats. He admitted the assault occurred, said they don't have the money, and threatened retaliation for pursuing legal action. Outstanding. Panic means he consulted a lawyer who explained his actual legal position. The threats give us additional civil causes of action. How do you feel? I looked at my neat handwriting documenting Jeremy's panic and desperation, then at Mary's photograph smiling encouragingly from the desk. Samuel, I feel like a man who's finally stopped being pushed around. Good, because tomorrow we file everything in court. Jeremy's about to learn that some mistakes can't be undone with charm and manipulation. After hanging up, I sat in my study, reviewing the evening's notes. Jeremy's transformation from arrogance to panic had been swift and complete. The reality of legal consequences was finally penetrating his entitled worldview. Justice, I reflected, was a patient teacher, but its lessons, once delivered, were never forgotten. Friday morning brought unseasonable warmth, and Harold Jenkins to my front door, coffee mug in hand, and concern etched across his weathered face. Willard, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I've been thinking about what happened last weekend. I invited him in, grateful for the company. The house had felt different since I'd started the legal proceedings. Not lonely, but expectant, like a theater before the curtain rises. Harold, I appreciate you checking on me. Actually, I wanted you to know something. The whole neighborhood's talking about what your son and his wife did, and not in a good way for them. We settled in my kitchen, the same spot where Jeremy had once sat begging for money, with promises he never intended to keep. What kind of talk? Harold sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Well, Mrs. Chen saw the moving truck Saturday morning. She was getting her newspaper when she heard the shouting. By the time that woman slapped you, half the street was watching. I'd known there were witnesses, but I hadn't realized how public the spectacle had become. Tom Patterson's been telling everyone about it. Says he's never seen anything like it. A grown woman striking an elderly man in his own front yard. People are upset, Willard. Really upset. The validation was unexpected and deeply satisfying. I'd spent decades being the quiet neighbor, the man who kept to himself and caused no trouble. Now, when I needed community support, it was there. Harold, I need to tell you something. I've filed a lawsuit against Jeremy. Contract violation and civil damages for the assault. Harold's eyebrows rose, but his expression remained supportive. Good for you. About time someone held that boy accountable. I might need witnesses, people who saw what happened Saturday morning. You'll have them. Mrs. Chen's already said she'd testify if needed, so have the Johnsons, and Tom Patterson's practically volunteering himself. None of us liked seeing you treated that way. A knock at the door interrupted us. Through the window I could see Mrs. Chen holding a covered dish. Willard, dear, I brought you some soup. she said when I opened the door. Her usual gentle demeanor was replaced by something fiercer. I heard about the legal troubles with your son. News travels fast in this neighborhood. It should. What that woman did to you was shameful. Harold told me you might need witnesses for court. Mrs. Chen's offer came without hesitation, her moral clarity refreshing after weeks of Jeremy's manipulation and lies. I appreciate that, Mrs. Chen, more than you know. That boy of yours needs to learn some respect, and his wife needs to learn you don't strike your elders, especially not in public like that. After she left, Harold and I sat in comfortable silence, processing the unexpected community solidarity. Willard, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How do you feel about all this? Suing your own son, I mean. That can't be easy. I considered the question carefully. A week ago it would have torn me apart. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Harold, I feel relieved. For the first time in years, I'm not being taken advantage of. I'm not being treated like a fool or a resource to be exploited. I'm finally fighting back. Mary would be proud. The simple statement hit me harder than any of Jeremy's threats or manipulations. Mary would be proud. She'd always believed in standing up to bullies, in fighting for what was right, regardless of family relationships. She always said I was too trusting when it came to Jeremy, that I made excuses for behavior I wouldn't tolerate from anyone else. Well, you're not making excuses anymore. Harold was right. The man who had quietly absorbed Jeremy's demands and manipulations was gone, replaced by someone who understood that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was enabling. That afternoon, I received a call from Samuel. Willard, Jeremy's attorney, contacted my office today. They want to negotiate. Already? Panic makes people move quickly. His lawyer understands the strength of our case. Signed contracts are hard to argue with, and the assault charge with multiple witnesses makes this a nightmare for them. What kind of negotiation? Payment plan, probably. Maybe partial settlement. The important thing is they're acknowledging the debt exists. That's a major victory right there. After hanging up, I walked to my study window and looked out at the quiet street. Mrs. Chen was watering her flowers. Harold was checking his mailbox, and life continued its normal rhythm. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one with the power. Samuel's office felt different this time, not like a place I was seeking help, but like the headquarters of a successful campaign. The mahogany conference table held neat stacks of documents, and Jeremy's attorney sat across from us looking distinctly uncomfortable. Mr. Brooks, Jeremy's lawyer began, my client is prepared to offer a settlement that we believe is fair to all parties. David Morrison was younger than Samuel, with the nervous energy of someone who'd taken a bad case and was trying to minimize the damage. I'd researched him after Samuel mentioned his name, recent law school graduate, mostly traffic violations and small claims court. Let's hear it, Samuel said, his tone professional but skeptical. Mr. Jeremy Brooks is prepared to acknowledge the loan and agree to a payment plan. $50,000 immediately, then monthly payments of $2,000 until the debt is satisfied. I did quick mental math. At that rate, it would take 12 years to pay off the principal, not counting interest. I was 68 years old. Absolutely not, I said before Samuel could respond. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Brooks, my client has limited resources. The house sale proceeds have been allocated to other expenses. Allocated to a Mercedes and designer furniture, Samuel interjected. We've done our research, Mr. Morrison. Your clients spent $300,000 in 6 weeks on luxury items, while planning to move into my client's home without permission. Those purchases were made in good faith. Good faith? I leaned forward, feeling the controlled anger I'd learned to harness over the past 2 weeks. Your client struck me in my own front yard. Where's the good faith in that? Morrison glanced at his notes nervously. My client is prepared to have Mrs. Brooks issue a written apology for that incident. Samuel's laugh was cold and professional. Your client committed assault and battery in front of multiple witnesses. A written apology doesn't address civil damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. What are you looking for? Morrison asked, defeat creeping into his voice. Samuel slid a document across the table. Full payment of principal and accrued interest. $372,000 within 90 days. If payment isn't made, we'll proceed with asset seizure and wage garnishment. That's impossible. They don't have that kind of money. Then they need to liquidate their luxury purchases, I said calmly. Sell the Mercedes. Return the designer furniture. Liquidate whatever assets they bought with my money. Morrison read Samuel's document, his face growing paler with each paragraph. This also includes civil damages for the assault. $50,000 for assault, emotional distress, and public humiliation. Very reasonable considering the circumstances. So you're demanding $422,000 total? We're demanding justice, I said. Your clients stole from me, attempted to move into my home without permission, and physically assaulted me when I refused. These are the consequences of their choices. Morrison excused himself to make a phone call, presumably to Jeremy. Through the conference room's glass wall, I could see him pacing and gesturing frantically. How do you think Jeremy's taking this? I asked Samuel. About as well as you'd expect. His cheap lawyer probably told him he could negotiate this down to a manageable payment plan. Now he's learning that stealing from your father has real consequences. Morrison returned, looking defeated. My client needs time to consider your terms. He has 48 hours, Samuel said. After that, we proceed with full legal action, including asset seizure and wage garnishment. The Illinois court system is very efficient when it comes to contract enforcement. After Morrison left, Samuel and I remained in the conference room reviewing the case files. Willard, I think they'll settle. Jeremy's probably calling every bank in Chicago trying to get a loan, but his debt-to-income ratio makes him a terrible risk. His only option is liquidating those luxury purchases. And if he doesn't, then we take everything: house, car, furniture, wages. The beauty of contract law is its clarity. He owes the money, period. The court will help us collect it. That evening I sat in my study with a glass of Mary's favorite wine, looking at the framed photograph of us at our last anniversary dinner. She was laughing at something I'd said, her eyes bright with love and mischief. You'd enjoy this, I told her picture. Our son finally learning that actions have consequences. The phone sat silent on my desk. 46 hours remaining for Jeremy to decide between voluntary payment and legal asset seizure. For the first time in 2 weeks, I was genuinely curious to see what choice he'd make. The call came at exactly 5:47 p.m. on the second day. I was reading in my study when the phone rang, Jeremy's name appearing on the caller ID. Dad, we accept your terms. His voice was hollow, defeated, stripped of the arrogance that had characterized our previous conversations. No threats, no manipulation, no appeals to family loyalty. All of them? All of them. We'll have the money within 30 days. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. After 35 years of giving in to his demands, I'd learned the power of letting Jeremy fill the quiet spaces with his own discomfort. We had to sell everything, Dad. The Mercedes, all of Lori's furniture, her jewelry. We took out loans against my salary. We're basically starting over. Good, I said simply. Good? That's all you have to say? The old Jeremy was trying to surface, the one who expected sympathy even when facing consequences for his own actions. But I was no longer the man who provided it. Jeremy, you stole from me, demanded to live in my house, and allowed your wife to assault me. Starting over seems like appropriate justice. She wants to apologize for hitting you. I'll accept her written apology as specified in the settlement agreement. Dad, after this is over, after we pay you back, can we try to rebuild our relationship? The question caught me off guard. For a moment, I heard echoes of the little boy who used to help me fix things in the garage, who brought me drawings from school, who called me the best dad in the world. But that boy had grown into a man who viewed kindness as weakness and generosity as foolishness. Jeremy, you can rebuild your relationship with me the same way you'll rebuild your financial life. One trustworthy action at a time, over many years, with no guarantee of success. That's harsh. That's reality. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. After hanging up, I called Samuel to report Jeremy's acceptance of our terms. Congratulations, Willard. You've just taught a very expensive lesson about the importance of honoring contracts and treating people with respect. Samuel, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. Thank me after the money's in your account. But yes, this has been one of the more satisfying cases of my career. It's not often I get to see justice served so clearly. 2 weeks later, the electronic transfer appeared in my bank account. $422,000, representing not just repayment with interest and damages, but validation that some fights are worth having. I printed the bank statement and filed it next to the original loan contract, creating a complete record of Jeremy's expensive education in personal responsibility. That evening, Harold stopped by with a bottle of wine. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that your son paid up. He did. Good for you, Willard. You showed real courage, standing up to family like that. We sat on my front porch, watching the sunset paint the quiet street in golden light. The same street where Lori had struck me 3 weeks earlier, where neighbors had witnessed my humiliation and rallied to support me. Harold, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I was too hard on them? Harold considered this carefully, the way he'd probably weighed difficult questions during his teaching career. Willard, kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's enabling. Your son needed to learn that his actions have consequences. Better he learn it from you than from the world, which would have been much less forgiving. Later that night, I sat in my study with Mary's photograph, feeling something I hadn't experienced since her death. Complete peace. The house was quiet, but it was my quiet, my sanctuary, earned and defended, filled with the satisfaction of a man who had finally learned to fight for what mattered. Jeremy would recover from this financial setback, probably become more responsible for it. Lori would learn that charm and manipulation have limits, and I had learned that even patient men can find their strength when pushed too far. The phone would ring again someday. Maybe Jeremy would call to report progress in his life, maybe to ask for advice instead of money. Maybe Harold would call with neighborhood news, or Samuel with updates from other cases. But tonight, the silence was perfect. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. At 68 years old, I had finally learned that some battles are worth fighting, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, is always worth pursuing. The contract was paid, the lesson was learned, and I was free. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,